Hey everybody, it's Kevin here from Happy Bird Games, and today we're checking out some Nintendo advertisements. Advertisements? Yeah, we're looking at some physical advertisements, things that came in the mail, or you picked up at a store, or maybe they came included with a Nintendo video game. Things like Club Nintendo, you've got the Nintendo Power Magazine subscriptions, even VHS tapes, as well as we're mainly focusing on things from the years 2002 through 2007, which were on the Nintendo Gamecube, the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, and the Nintendo Wii generations. So let's jump in with Nintendo advertisements from 2002 to 2007, today on Happy Bird Games. Going all the way back to the Nintendo Entertainment System for a bit, we have things like Nintendo Power. Nintendo Power was a magazine that accompanied Nintendo game players. You could get them in the mail each month, and they'd basically have lots of strategy guides, secret codes, maps for games, lots of full-color photos and images, comic books, reviews, and more about your favorite Nintendo video games from the Nintendo NES, the Game Boy, as well as later the Super Nintendo, and other consoles into the future. Now, with many Nintendo video games and accessories, you would get an included advertisement telling you about Nintendo Power Magazine and asking you to subscribe to the magazine. And definitely, I did subscribe back in the day. I was subscribed for a very long time, which is where I got many of my advertisements you'll see on this video today. So before you try your next game pack, plug into the power, Nintendo Power. And some of the early Nintendo accessories and games, especially the ones that were made by Nintendo themselves, also came with included posters. Now, these posters were also a form of advertising because not only were they exciting and fun to look at and put on your wall, but they are basically an advertisement. They show multiple games coming out for the Nintendo NES. This one was included with the 4 score as well. And this one says, "Now you're playing with power," Nintendo's slogan at the time. And it's just a really exciting picture that also makes you want to buy some of these games. And jumping ahead to the next generation, the Super Nintendo, we've got a different form of advertisement coming out now from Nintendo Power, and that is Donkey Kong Country Exposed. Now, I've talked about this in my Donkey Kong Country review video, but Donkey Kong Country Exposed is actually a VHS videotape that is basically a commercial. It's mostly a commercial, a little bit behind the scenes. It's fun to watch, though. It takes place in Nintendo's headquarters and lets you know lots about the game Donkey Kong Country. It really entices you to buy it, and here's the pamphlet that came included with it. Donkey Kong Country Exposed. Now with Donkey Kong Country Exposed, it was not enough just to try to get you to buy the video game. They also wanted you to get a subscription to Nintendo Power once again. So you can see that Nintendo Power was a big focus for Nintendo back in the day. It was a driving force and a connection between the gamers as well as their games. So you gotta buy the games, you gotta buy the Nintendo Power. They kind of go together. They actually did help you out if you got both. So if you had the video game, not only could you play it, and then you get the Nintendo Power, you got the guide to explain what to do, the cheats, the tips, tricks, the strategies. And you also got things like, if you subscribe, you could get a free Donkey Kong Country's Player's Guide, which is an even more extended strategy guide specifically for the Donkey Kong Country game. And just to let you know, if you were back in the day and you called into Nintendo Powers and you got your subscription, they wouldn't just give you the Donkey Kong Country thing, they would give you a selection of things that you could choose from. But now we're going back a little bit to the year 2002, and I've got this stack of advertising. Nintendo advertising. It's gotta be cool, right? Well, I've got these advertisements from 2002 to 2007. Let's go over each and every one of them briefly and check out what the advertisement styles were like and what things were like in those generations of Nintendo. This first one's a big one, a book-sized Nintendo Gamecube and Game Boy Advance guide from winter 2002. This is actually a free catalog that I got at a store. It just says free, take one on the top, that's how I remember that. And basically you open it up and you see lots and lots of advertisements for the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. There's actually a table of contents showing everything in this book and what sections are for each. So there's actually the Nintendo GameCube, the Game Boy Advance, and the e-reader has its own section. There's some pretty cool video game images in these books, And this is one of the coolest ones of all because I really do love the GameCube. It's one of my favorite consoles. It's my favorite console of that generation. And I just had a lot of fun playing the GameCube. I was very excited for it. And it's just, 2002 was a good year for the GameCube. You can see it starts out with a classic, now classic, Metroid Prime. And it's got some full-color images, artwork. It continues on with Zelda Wind Waker. Goes on to Resident Evil 0. These are mostly exclusives at the start here. Star Fox Adventures, Mario Sunshine, Animal Crossing, Wario World, and then it moves on to some third-party games such as Harry Potter, Dragon's Lair 3D, Crash Bandicoot, and even more like Spyro, Star Wars games, SpongeBob games. It goes on to some other ones in different categories like 1080, which is a Nintendo game, but it's Extreme Sports section. They even have some retro section with Namco Museum and Sonic Mega Collection for the GameCube. Now this is pretty detailed. They have a category and a page for almost every game that is coming out in 2002 for the Nintendo GameCube. Now we're on to the Game Boy Advance section. You got this cool model, kind of looks like a jean or clothing company model, holding his Game Boy Advance outdoors. Yeah, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. Anyways, we've got Metroid Fusion, Link to the Past Remake, Castlevania, Revenge of Shinobi, Ghouls and Ghosts, Street Fighter Alpha 3. The list goes on and on with great Game Boy Advance games that you or a friend can be shared with. And some of these are kind of funny to look at now because they're rare and expensive, such as the GameCube broadband adapter, which allowed the GameCube to go online with Phantasy Star Online, and a couple other games to play LAN mode. I actually have that. But one that I don't have is the GameCube component cable, which is notoriously expensive and rare. And what Nintendo publication would be complete without a Nintendo Power ad? That was mostly it for the GameCube and Game Boy Advance games. Let's move on to a next generation. The next generation of handhelds is the Nintendo DS. And the earliest one that I could find for the DS is this one here, about the video game Nintendogs. New Puppy Magazine. It's kind of like a guide about dogs, but then it's also a guide about the game Nintendogs. Now with this advertising, it's more like a strategy guide than an actual ad, but it does serve the purpose of both. It makes you want to get the game if you don't have it, and it also gives you some tips and tricks for playing the game Nintendogs, which is a simple, casual game, but it does help to introduce newcomers and a new generation of gamers to the casual-friendly Nintendo DS. And on the back of it, there's an advertisement for Animal Crossing DS, also known as Wild World, later on. Now with the Nintendo GameCube, I briefly mentioned the broadband adapter, which allowed you to play video games online on your Nintendo GameCube. It was rare, hard to find, and kind of obscure because it only worked with the Phantasy Star Online series of games, as well as some LAN party games such as Kirby Air Ride and Mario Kart Double Dash and 1080 Avalanche. I believe those were the ones. Now, they didn't really use online very often on the Nintendo consoles, but on the Nintendo DS, it had a built-in Wi-Fi connection, so here's an advertisement telling you all about Nintendo Wi-Fi, and why it's good, how it's easy to connect, what to do with it, and what to know. This is basically a guide featuring the first 3 online Nintendo DS games, which were Tony Hawk American Skateland, Mario Kart DS, and Animal Crossing Wild World, which has the title Wild World now. In the previous advertising, they called it Animal Crossing DS. Basically shows you how to set up your router, your Wi-Fi. I used to have this, the Nintendo Wi-Fi USB connector that you could just plug into your computer's USB port, and it would enable it as a Wi-Fi hotspot specifically for your DS. It also worked with the Wii, I think, later on. So it goes through the few games that use the Wi-Fi connection at the start, and it's a basic advertisement. It's a small one, but it gets the job done well enough, letting you know all about Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Speaking of Nintendo DS, we've got an advertisement specifically focused on the Nintendo DS exclusively, featuring NintendoDS.com, as well as the Nintendo DS on the front cover. A really stylized approach. It's kind of similar how they advertised the GameCube, but even more sleek and sci-fi. This cover actually makes the DS, the fat DS, the original DS, a little more cool looking because it looks really shiny. It looks really sci-fi, futuristic, it looks new. It reminds me of when I first saw the DS, and I was like, whoa, 2 screens, a touchscreen, it's so different and unique, and I'm not sure how video games are going to play on it, but it looks exciting and new and fresh. And that's what this image really represents to me. Now when you go through the advertisement, you've got page after page of really nicely done artwork featuring the Nintendo DS. All this stuff makes it look sleek and cool, very futuristic and kind of hip, you know? It's kind of like a hip thing, playing the DS with your friends. You get off a break at high school or college, you gotta bring your DS with you. So it's really hyping it up. This was in the Nintendo's phase of touching is good, where they had a series of commercials and, of course, advertising campaigns on paper, like this one, where you could actually flip it open, and it would show you the insides of the Nintendo DS. So this advertisement basically tells you everything there is to know about the Nintendo DS at launch, the original model that is from 2005, and you've got some things about the games towards the end of it, and you've got some things about the touchscreen and its unique features, as well as some really nice artwork that kind of gets you hyped up, gets you interested in this new sci-fi looking future of the new Nintendo systems. As a longtime Nintendo fan, I definitely have good memories of the launch of the Gamecube, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, and every console after that. And with the Nintendo DS, I remember it having sort of a rocky launch, not as rocky as the 3DS had, or even the Wii U, but the DS had a rough launch at first. People knew about the PSP was coming out, and the DS looked outdated in terms of graphics even then. Even though it looked better than the Game Boy Advance, there were some games that were very similar on the Game Boy Advance and the DS at launch. Some of those were third-party games, but some of the main Nintendo games, such as Mario Kart DS, Super Mario 64's DS Remake, and Advance Wars DS, really brought you into a new generation. Games like Metroid Prime Hunters and the upcoming Animal Crossing for DS were really exciting hits that came out early on, were announcing things like these advertisements and got you hyped for them, and they turned out to be great games that people love and remember for the Nintendo DS. Now we've got another guide from Nintendo Power here. It's the 2005 Nintendo Power Holiday Buyer's Guide. It's a simple guide that details what's cool, what's new, and what's happening with Nintendo games in the holiday of 2005. So basically you could get this, you could see the actual review scores from Nintendo Power magazine next to each of the games, which is helpful at the time. And you can see which games are coming out to put on your wish list for Christmas or the holidays, and you can see which games you wanna, you might be interested in, how good they are, what they're about, and you can be like, hey, Mom and Dad, I want this game. Put it on the wish list for Santa, good to go. Or maybe just a wish list for your own to buy. Now this one still has some lingering GameCube games. Even in 2005 with the DS coming out, and the DS is in this guide, it also had the GameCube, so this was still before the Nintendo Wii. Sometimes people seem to forget that now, that there was a time when it was just the GameCube, the Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo DS. The Nintendo Wii didn't come out towards the end of 2006, so that was later on, and there was a time where the DS was right next to the GameCube. So it starts out with some GameCube games, then moves on to some DS games and Game Boy Advance games. You've got some bundles, so you've got different bundles. It also features the Game Boy Micro, which is a Game Boy Advance, with a smaller size and a nice backlight. I have one of those, they're really great. But they're pretty obscure. Even back in 2005, they weren't advertised very heavily, the Game Boy Advance Micro. And then you've got a nice page that I wish Nintendo would still do today with their Nintendo Switch games, but they don't, and that is the Player's Choice. The Player's Choice are games that are successful sellers. They get selected by Nintendo, they get a yellow label on the box, so they have a different box art, which is kind of bad, but it's okay because they're only $20. So these Player's Choice games have a lower price, and they're classic games, best-selling games. I wish Nintendo still did that with Nintendo Switch. Now we're moving on to a little bit step up of a generation, and that is the Nintendo DS Lite. So this is an advertisement all about the DS Lite. You can see it's got a slightly different theme than the original DS's advertisement. And they're targeting the casual generation definitely with this. There's a different type of crowd that they're aiming towards, rather than the core gamers from the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube and earlier days. This isn't the radical Nintendo Power awesome dude stuff that we know from the 80s and 90s. This is, okay, we want your grandparents to play, we want your mom and dad, we want your aunts and uncles, we want everyone to be able to play video games now. Video games are not just for the kid in the basement They are for everyone. And this is what's happening during the Nintendo DS Lite generation. You've got games like Brain Age and Big Brain Academy for the DS. These were two hot sellers. These were big sellers for the Nintendo DS. I know in my family particularly, my parents each bought their own DS Lite and a copy of Brain Age, and that was all they bought for the Nintendo DS. I'm not even kidding. They bought a whole console, each, and a game, and that's it. And by the way, they did that again with the Wii. So as this advertisement focused on the casual crowd of Nintendo, it did start with Brain Age and Big Brain Academy. Then it moved on to some sports and Mario games, games that are familiar to non-gamers. You know, everybody knows Mario, but maybe they haven't actually played the games. Then you've got some of the classic heroes of Star Fox and Samus Aran from Metroid Prime. You've got Donkey Kong here. Everyone knows Donkey Kong as well. Maybe not everyone's played his games yet, so sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes these casual games can lead into a bridge between gamers and non-gamers so they can revisit or visit for the first time characters like Donkey Kong or Mario. At the very end of this Nintendo Lite book, they talk about the future of video games, the Nintendo Wii, the revolution. Now we're winding down our video here, but we've got a few more advertisements left in this one, and one of them is specifically and exclusively for the game New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS. Yes, this is a DS game, and this is actually a really big deal for the DS. You've got a new Mario Bros. It's not exactly Super Mario Bros. 4, but it kind of is. It's in the same vein. It's a 2D Mario game featuring 3D graphics, but in that same classic 2D Mario style on a great handheld, the Nintendo DS. And it doesn't rely too heavily on the touchscreen, which is a good feature and a good choice, I think, for this game. This was a really fun game for me back in the day, and one of the first DS games that I remember playing quite a lot of was New Super Mario Bros. It's a great one, and this advertisement really does a good job of selling it in these few short pages. Before we move on to the Wii generation, we've got some more advertisements for the DS featuring the Touch generation. These Touch generation games were games that had a specific Touch generation logo on the box art. There's a few games in this series. They weren't all specifically by the same developers or by Nintendo, but they were just called the Touch generation games. These were games that if you saw this logo, you would know that these are a casual game geared towards the casual audience. Gamers that may or may not have played a video game in their life in the past and aren't really gamers, but still want something to do in their free time when they're bored on a Nintendo DS, and they want to be able to use the touchscreen almost exclusively because it's easier to control and understand. I know my grandma has a DS, and she needs the big screen, the XL size, or a bigger stylus because she plays touchscreen games. She plays Tetris, she plays Dr. Mario. And one of those games on this Touch generation is the game Tetris Ds, which is actually a really great Tetris game. It's not just your simple Tetris, it has a lot of Nintendo characters coming in for collaborations and new game modes. That's a really fun one. The other Touch generation games are Brain Age, Big Brain Academy, Magnetica, Sudoku, Tetris DS, True Swing Golf, Nintendogs, and Electroplankton. So now we're moving on to the Nintendo Wii, Nintendo's console, the revolution. This was the first major motion-controlled gaming console that focused on the casual audience and motion controls while still retaining the core Nintendo audience of gamers that like Mario and Zelda and Metroid. And this was a guide called We Welcome You. It shows all these Mii characters in a two-dimensional hand-drawn appearance art style, but they're still the Miis you know and love. And basically it asks you, do you already own a Wii? Share this booklet with a friend, and it basically tells you what the Miis are on the Wii. Now, the Miis are basically your avatar. You create a character, and you can see them in multiple games. They show up. You have your friends come over, and they make a Mii. It's just basically their own persona, their own made-up character, or sometimes a character based on an actor or a movie character. And they come over, they make a Mii. You can see them in your games as you're playing. Games such as Wii Sports or Mario Kart on the Wii used Miis. And then there was the Mii channel as well, and there were some other activities you can do on the Wii console built in that use Miis. So this guide basically shows you what Miis are, how to make a Mii, everything about the Miis, and they've got Wii Sports. They've even got a little bit on the Virtual Console, which they titled A Link to the Past. And you've got classics like Ocarina of Time, Donkey Kong F-Zero, It tells you how to get online. It shows a picture of Nintendo's website from the time, which is pretty cool. With Miyamoto there. You've got some other things about the features and other things you can do on the Nintendo Wii console. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of the Nintendo Wii. I loved it when it was out. Even though I'm not really a casual gamer at all, I did appreciate both the casual and the core games on the Nintendo Wii, and I had a lot of fun with that. I actually went to the launch party for the Wii. I was very hyped for it, and I was not disappointed overall. And the Nintendo Wii, they really focused on the Miis a lot. Now, I'm not that into the Miis, but they're a cool thing to add to the console to give it some character and style back when it launched. Now it's the year 2007, and we're moving on to the catalog from 2007 by Nintendo. This catalog features the Nintendo DS Lite in different colors, as well as on the back, the Nintendo Wii console. And this has a unique design, how it has different, spaced out pages. So the first pages are small, then they get bigger, and then the second part with the Wii has even bigger pages. So it kind of flips out in different categories, detailing each console, the DS and the Nintendo Wii. By this time, the Nintendo Gamecube and Game Boy Advance have pretty much been put out and are done making games for and done with the advertising, out with the old, in with the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo Wii. So you can see you've got these casual type images of families getting together to play their Nintendo DS. Now, how often did this really happen in real life? Maybe more often than you think, because my grandparents and my parents all had a DS. I had a DS. We didn't really get around and play them together very often, but we all still had one. Let's see, there's some older people playing the Brain Age and Brain Age 2 games. You've got games for young teenagers. You've got games for core gamers, such as Yoshi's Island, which is a pretty hardcore game, actually. You've got some other games for the DS coming out, like Animal Crossing and Donkey Kong Jungle Climber, which might have been older games back in 2007. These might be older releases that they're still advertising to keep up with. I said there wasn't any Game Boy Advance on this, but there's actually a page of Game Boy Advance games, and just the player's choice ones that are left from the Game Boy Advance, some highlights of that generation, and they're basically just the Mario games. So they're still advertising Game Boy Advance just because the Nintendo DS Lite can still play GBA games. Then you've got the Nintendo Wii section of this catalog. You can see there's a couple playing the game, you can see there's a family playing the game, and then you've got sports games, and all these console games that you know and love from the Nintendo Wii being played by these models and actors in these pages, getting really into the games like Sight Truck and Metroid Prime 3. And then you've got just a page of just people playing games. And actually they do have some GameCube stuff in this, because the Nintendo Wii could still play GameCube discs. So you've got the average GameCube gamer here. Kind of look like me in high school. You've got a little bit about how to get online with your consoles, the Wii and the Nintendo DS. And we've got one more Wii advertisement for this video, and that is a Wii guide to Big Brain Academy for the Wii. This is the Big Brain Academy Wii degree. It shows all the Miis going into their academy. I played the one on the DS briefly. It's basically got math problems and quizzes and puzzles to solve that are still fun like a game, but can challenge your brain and your mind. Now, I'm not sure if these are actually going to help you get any smarter, but they do let you stay on the edge of your brain and kind of get your brain boosted and going, which is a nice activity to do, especially if you're in college or something. You're taking a break, you want to relax, but you still want to stay active. You don't want to get into that slump. I know, I've been there. And if you want to take a break, play some Metroid Prime. It's on the same console. But you've also got Big Brain Academy, and this might help you stay a little more alert during your college years. Overall, there was a lot of focus on Nintendo Power Magazine, getting you to buy the game and the manual and the strategy guide, and then later on pushing towards the casual generation, which is something that definitely these advertisements help to do. They help people understand that the Wii and the DS Lite were for a casual gamer generation that everybody could get into, everybody could play and enjoy. Your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your kids, your teenagers, everyone can play. Doesn't matter who you are. And I like that. I like that with Nintendo, that everyone can play and have fun. Now, I don't know why I kept these advertisements. They're fun to look at, and they're kind of a collectible item at this point. I had them in with my Nintendo Horror magazines, and I found them all today for this video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I'll look back at those Nintendo advertisements from 2002 to the years 2007. It's interesting to look back at, and it's interesting to have those memories coming back about the Wii generation. Alright everybody, thanks for watching this video. Please stay tuned to Hybrid Games for more classic gaming goodness. If you like this video, please be sure to leave it a like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. And you can check me out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The information is in the description box. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. Bye!